Welcome to After Credits here on the Intercut podcast channel, where we review a new movie, including everything that comes after the credits. I'm your co-host, Zachary Shevich, and joining me, he really likes your NASA stickers. It's Arturo Zurita.
And the Rockets in total as well. Don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan of the stickers, but I feel like 2022 has given us a lot of rocket movies, a lot of kids with rockets, and then turmoil happens between Black Phone and Armageddon Time. If a kid has a rocket, it's not going to end up well.
Yeah, not really going well for kids in 2022 movies either. A lot of like
Not really.
angst and anguish and learning life lessons as we only do in the movies, as we only can in the movies, I guess. Armageddon Time, another director looking back at their childhood through film. We're getting a lot of these in 2022. I feel like this is one of the interesting ones, though. We are going to get into this review and get into spoilers a little bit later. But before we talk about spoilers, let's talk more generally about Armageddon Time, which sees James Gray return to movie theaters, his eighth and most personal feature film yet. It follows a
Easily.
young Jewish boy growing up in Queens in 1980. Paul Graff, played by Banks Repeta. And he attends public school, finds that while his teacher, Mr. Turkletop, gives him a hard time, he's much harsher on Johnny, his new young black friend, played by Jaylin Webb. Jaylin Webb, by the way, also really good in that film Bruiser we talked about back during our TIFF coverage. So we're going to hear more about Jaylin
Ah,
Webb in 2023.
wow,
But
good for him.
yeah, Paul befriends Johnny, but finds that their backgrounds are very different. Johnny lives with his grandmother, who has dementia. Meanwhile, Paul lives in a comfortable home with his parents and grandparents. Describing his family as rich, although they're seemingly more middle class here, but
Not very
definitely
rich, bro.
ascending the class ladder. At home, he's a nag to his parents who hope that he'll drop his dreams of becoming an artist and start applying himself at school like his older brother, who's attending a fancy private school. The weight of expectations hangs heavy over his head, and he's reminded of his Jewish grandparents' escape from the Nazi takeover of Eastern Europe and how coming to America brings with it a generational pursuit of wealth and the American dream. Arturo, Gray's film tackles complex social dynamics at the onset of the Reagan presidency while telling an upsetting story of a sort of socio-political coming of age for its young protagonist. I felt like it was an extremely thoughtfully constructed uh, film with inflicted with the pain of memories that you'd rather forget and rather unique in the spectrum of coming of age films. But what was your takeaway from Armageddon Time?
You had brought it up earlier. We have this slew of movies where it's the directors making these biopics to a degree of their childhood. We last year had Belfast, where it was Kenneth Branagh kind of revisiting his childhood in a black and white format, where it's technically him being the kid, and he's kind of looking back at Protestants, religion, really as a whole, what his town had to face during that time, kind of his love for movies. Spielberg is taking it to the next level because it's like literally, you've seen the movie twice. I've yet to see Fablemans, but you having seen it a second time, he even came out going like, nah, he is like really going in full emotion on this idea of what it's like to be a Fableman, a Spurgman, someone who knows how to tell these stories so well. I didn't catch Empire of Light, but that felt like another one where Sam Mendes is revisiting like his favorite theater and the idea of making movies. We have just gotten
Mm-hmm.
an onslaught of these movies, and Armageddon Time is yet another one. But instead of looking back at filmmaking, which all of them are going to do, and really the religious side of it, what he looks at the most is the politics and the really the wealth and class struggles that are happening because, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
he begins school publicly. And
Mm-hmm.
because of that, he has completely different influences and he's able to see a whole side of the world that he's going to be taken out of, right? And looking back at this as a movie that's coming from a director, it takes a little bit of all the other ones. You know, some of them I haven't seen, but it takes a little bit of Belfast, where he is revisiting and does a great job of seeing the whole movie from the point of view of a child. But then it's also, I don't know how old James Gray is. It is also, middle-aged James Gray being able
Yeah,
to add some elements to be like, yeah, those people who are in that those hallways, you never thought of them differently, but I, as an adult, they come with some extra baggage there that you didn't know. And I
right.
feel like he does kind of apply that to the movie. That takes me out of it a little bit, but there is some interesting discussions on the movie because it is discussing guilt. And what's
Yeah,
always interesting on these movies is that people want a movie about someone apologizing, but Lord forbid they ever remind you on what they're apologizing for. It's like we
right.
forget that if someone wants to be guilty about something, you're gonna have to kind of mention the stuff that brings that guilt. And I
Mhm.
know it could be a slippery slope because no one wants to bring that up. And more than that, is it him seeking out that guilt? Or is he seeking out that guilt going, guys, here's a movie about everything that I kind of realized was wrong? Someone comes up to him and says, I still think your movie may have something wrong. And he's going, no, 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 no. It's your time to listen to me. I've already done my listening. No one wants to hear that either, Zach. And I think that there may be some things in the movie that I don't think he did maliciously, but just
Mhm.
like he learned a lesson from when he was a kid and he didn't realize it, as a grown man, I think he may still not realize some of the stuff that he doesn't, again, do maliciously on screen, but can still be something that another person is saying, hey, you're saying you're listening to us. That's the point of this movie. We're telling you there's still a little bit more listening to be done.
Totally. And that's the thing about the backlash towards what this movie is doing is something that is completely understandable and something that like I've been figuring out how to contend with, given that this is a movie that I've personally responded to. And I think ultimately it's something that like while it is a weakness of the movie, I think there's all these other strengths that I think are really commendable and
Is it a
worth
weakness?
focusing on. Uh, well, I mean, it's sort of like it is a part of the movie that even if it's not necessary, even if you don't want to say it's necessarily a weakness of this film, it plays into like a larger trend that generally sidelines black characters in films that
It
center white
does.
protagonists. So like I totally understand and don't have like I don't like I wouldn't uh I wouldn't object to anybody's objection to that element of it. But I think, like you were hinting at in your analysis of it, like it's also so central to the type of story trying to be told here. In also in that, like I personally thought it was very unique to see this kind of like awakening to the world around you depicted as a kind of coming of age in a way that I don't know if I've quite seen that in a film, and I do
Mm-hmm.
just respect that perspective being shown. You mentioned how Gray, as a adult filmmaker, is like imbuing his own kind of judgment on what happened, and to me, that's actually something I respond to about the movie. I think the film is just full of these things that like he would maybe rather have forgotten or rather have not participated in, and there is this kind of shame to the events of the movie that I think is
Yeah,
palpable. So I think it's not simply absolving himself of his role. I think there is a little more going on than
for sure.
trying to say like he's one of the good ones. I think, and
Uh-huh.
in fact, like in some of the interviews that he's done about the movie, I think it's really interesting to note that he says he views his family's role in this film as kind of like the villains, which I don't know. I thought that's a kind of fascinating approach to
Yes.
telling this kind of story.
And that's another reason why I ask you. I was like, do you see it
Yeah.
as a weakness and not something where it's just like not inherently, I don't want to use the word wrong, but like when you're working out, you're either going to be someone who's like really big and bulky,
Hmm.
so you'll have a lot of strength, but you probably won't be able to run fast. And then if you run fast, you probably don't have that much mass on you to have that much strength. If a movie is going to go in on this idea of guilt, it will have to upset people. Because the
Right.
people it upsets when they're telling their stories, in order for it to not be universal, the reason you like this movie is because it's so specific to something that connects to you.
Hmm.
You're asking them to fix something that would take that away from you, right? So it's a slippery slope type of movie where, in order to be able to touch on the subject that it needs to showcase the issues that's happening. And yeah, what happens here is that you have a kid who's kind of absolved from, and we'll get into spoilers gradually, but from
Hmm.
incidents that happen between him and his new friend. But his new friend
Yeah.
gets the short end of the stick, and he is practically learning the lessons out of that. So if you're going into this movie and you're this kid, you might learn a lesson. But if you're the other kid, what are you getting out of this
Right.
movie?
Right. And like, I know we have a diverse bunch of intercuties watching our reviews, which is why always like want to like kind of preface when I can see these things.
Yeah.
But there's also these elements that I really thought were unique and special about this film. And,
Hmm.
in talking about that sort of concept of guilt or whatever, the film is fairly uniquely Jewish in terms of its construction. Like, I think to reckon with what it's trying to do, you have to also contend with the fact that this is a family of Jewish people who've emigrated to America because they're escaping, persecution from the Nazis, and that survivor's guilt that comes with being, part of potentially one of the very few people in your family who's made it through that. It's something that I think any Jew is like familiar with if you have these conversations around, at home and stuff. And there's something very there's something very true to how that plays out within the family, because at least in Judaism, there's this concept called tikkun olam, and it sort of calls upon Jews to repair the world, to make it a more just and peaceful place through acts of kindness and acts of charity. And Jews, because of their sort of ascension through social classes over the years, coming into America and being more demonized and being part of the lower classes, being subject to a bunch of anti-Semitism, and then this film distinctly taking place in a time where Jews were doing what they could to try and rise through the social classes, and the way in which that sort of has taken a lot of the community away from sort of this identity of having empathy for other oppressed people, because it's so integral to the experience of being Jewish that I feel like it's so to me, I found the idea of denying that part of your existence to be very interesting. And I
Hmm.
don't know. I don't know. I just haven't seen that quite depicted in this way before, which takes it to me way beyond some film about like white guilt. It's more complex than that.
And I think it's allowed to be. I think something can have is its in and outs to it, and viewing it from the perspective of like him being innocent, right? Because a lot
Mm-hmm.
of it is it's not really critiques on the. It could be critiques on the film, but it's also critiques on James Gray himself, which I always find weird because I've listened to enough to hear his perspective of his approach to this movie. This idea that he likes to make movies where he feels there's something he hasn't attacked or
Mm-hmm.
inspected in his past, and he wants to put that up on the screen. In particular, right now, this was something that really stood out to him. And looking at it from that point of view of like trusting him, right? Just not pulling his intent, right, and
Right.
deciding what it is for him. I thought it was fascinating to see a young kid uh, not just learn his lessons, but also figure them out himself. You had mentioned right now what you kind of described it like a model minority. This
Right.
idea that the entire race of people come together in order to be able to make it up the ranks on their own, and in doing so, you kind of ignore everything else that's happening around you. And here
Mm-hmm.
you have a kid whose brother is in private school, so he doesn't get any of that. In fact, when he's in the private school, it all changes to being one mindset. Ill, look at those people who aren't us. But when he's
Mm-hmm.
in the public school, in his own mind, he is already adjusted to, yeah, this is just another one of my classmates. And I'm noticing something a little different, but I'm only noticing this because I'm being exposed to it. And what it really felt like
Mm-hmm.
is this idea of exposure. When you're actually exposed to others around you, you are actually able to get a different perspective. His brother doesn't have that perspective because they put
Mm-hmm.
him on a track, on a route to never have to deal with that. You're going to be on here, you don't have to worry about it. That school that he's in holds assemblies where it ends up being a particular family who's pretty big in New York who comes in to let you know you're not getting any handouts as they give them handouts. You're not going to
Mm-hmm.
take this treacherous path because they have a really good path for them. Everything has been set forth for you. And what happens when you're looking back at your past and you're realizing, yo, I had the one way ticket, that silver spoon. I may not have been as rich as the people who run the school, but my family still had the connections to be in that school. How do you grapple that? I find that to be a very interesting dynamic at it
Right.
because if you can't look at that, then there is no fixing anything. It's an apartheid movement to a degree where you want someone to apologize or to ask for forgiveness, but you don't want to ask for the wrong. You need to acknowledge the wrong. It gets awkward. It
Mm-hmm.
gets cringy. It gets a little weird. Um, I do wish that there was more to learn or more perspectives that he could have seen from the kid. An effective part of the movie is that you're always focusing it in from the perspective of what's the kid's name in the movie?
Paul.
Paul. And they
Yeah.
do a really great job of that. There's some really great sound design that happens in the movie, especially when he goes from just joking around with his mom, and there's, the cooking scenes where everything's happening a mile a minute, and he does this little
Mhm.
twitch, which I thought this kid did a great job. He's always he's saying one line, and then all of a sudden he starts another word, exactly like a teenage kid would talk. And they did a
Yeah.
great job at casting him because he's supposed to be a young James Gray, and James Gray
Mhm.
knew I need to cast a kid who's going to be annoying. But we always talk about this. Some directors forget I need an annoying character. Does that mean I need to annoy the audience as well? No. This is a kid who comes off as that annoying kid who won't shut up, who thinks he knows better than his parents. But I
Mhm.
didn't feel at any point in the runtime of the movie that he ever crossed that line of actually getting obnoxious as an audience member.
Yeah.
So he killed it.
Absolutely right. Like there's that moment early in the film when they're sitting down for dinner, and he decides he wants dumplings from the Chinese place rather than what his mom cooked, and just
Yes.
like how insistent he is. It's like obnoxious in the way that
A
kids
kid would be.
can be realistically obnoxious, but not obnoxious in a way that's going to get you to try and like turn off the movie.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
he really killed it on that aspect, and I just liked seeing a lot of the stuff from his point of view.
Hmm.
There's one sequence where he's going to get hit by his father, and that
Ooh.
whole moment just turns into like this horror movie. The camera stops being steady, and all of a sudden it's shaky. It was like it's straight out of a horror film, and it takes you
Hmm.
back to those days if you were ever, disciplined by the belt. I would say. Woo! Did he get that down? Very
Yeah.
right.
No, it is a
Effective.
particularly upsetting and horrifying scene, and like it's funny because they brought up that scene during the press conference at the New York Film Festival, and I think people were trying to ask like, was that scene uncomfortable to film? And they were all like, no, it was fine. Like I think a lot is really suggested, and I think it's the filmmaking does a really good job of just capturing how small Paul would feel in that moment, without necessarily like showing you as much upsetting stuff. And also, it's just talking about the performances in the film. Jeremy Strong is just like titanically angry in that moment. It's angry in the way that like it's like an impulsive reaction type of anger. You're not doing it rationally, and that's part of what's so frightening about it too. Strong is so good in this film. Just speaking about the performances, Anne Hathaway, Anthony Hopkins, and Jeremy
He's
Strong,
great.
they're all kind of considered outside contenders for the year-end acting awards at this time. But do you think any other performances
Jeremy.
will be contenders for Intercut's best performances of the year?
Jeremy. Again, in the form of the dynamic of a family who's kind of teaching the kids different lessons. One thing that I really enjoyed is that it's not one of those movies where the whole family's like, "You've lived with us, so you should already kind of know this vicariously."
Right.
But we're going to spend this movie teaching you a lesson that you should have already known. They do teach him the lesson, like they sit him down. There's a whole sequence, which I believe is the poster with the whole rocket scene, where his grandpa sits down and tells him the lesson. But there are moments before he actually is told what he should or should not do, where he is already doing what's right. I like seeing that. I like it feeling like a lived in family where you could see that this kid already kind of had the right approach, but he should still be sat down by his family and told what to do. I love the discussions with his mom, especially because his mom has this whole storyline where she's kind of running to be someone pretty big in the school board. She's already big
Yeah.
in the PTA.
She's
So
already the
she's
head
kind
of
of,
the PTA.
yeah,
Yeah.
she's trying to be a mom. She's trying to be a Jewish woman in America, but she's also like trying to be a woman in business and she's trying to
Right.
make it in. And this kid is not helpful because they're calling him slow. They're calling him a troublemaker, and he's spending more time in the principal's office than he is the classroom.
Yeah.
She was really good in it. I'd be happy to see her get an award, but I think her best performance was in TV this year on Apple TV.
Yeah.
Uh, Anthony Hopkins, my man plays himself. If you've seen Anthony Hopkins on his own social media, the man is hilarious. He's just so heartwarming,
Hmm.
and it really just felt like he was just being a grandpa on set.
Yeah.
The way that he says certain things, I'm like, I feel like this is how I've heard Anthony Hopkins speak like this,
Yeah.
say little jabs and quips, and he's a freaking perfect grandpa in this movie. But it's
Yeah.
Jeremy Strong easily who takes it because that sequence we were talking about where he comes in very scary, yeah, he was invoking an uncle or his own father at that scene, the way that he came in. I mean, just a little kid knowing where to go in the house the moment he heard that his mom said,
Right.
I can't get the lesson across to you. It's going to be your dad. He knew exactly to go into the bathroom, into the tub, right? Like that speaks to a flashback memory that James Gray was telling him.
Yeah.
And I was hearing James Gray talk.
Mhm.
It's Jeremy Strong, bro.
Yeah, there's definitely like the very Jewish inflections that he's
The
probably
inflections,
learned from.
there's some lip smacking that he does, a way that he just does certain breaths through his teeth. It was like
Yeah,
crazy detailed.
yeah.
He, without a doubt, everyone's great in the movie. Jeremy Strong ran with it. He is my pick out of this movie in terms of performances. You could just tell that like he felt like a full lived in through person that wasn't just important to him, to James Gray, but to a lot of people on the set. I could tell they know this man right here.
Yeah, mine as well. My pick for my favorite performance from the film. You know, supporting actor. There is some sort of contention that it's kind of a weak category at the Oscars this year. So I don't really understand why people don't think this performance it should be among them, because it is transformative. He really is like channeling something
Mm.
through this film. Let's talk more generally about James Gray, because his films tend to be pretty deliberately paced. They're fairly dense with information and can be emotionally muted, which I think makes it more difficult for people to connect with his work. Did you find that those same things were true here, and did they affect how you felt about the movie?
I feel you and I are really good at going into a movie to see what the director has to offer us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the discussions we were having earlier have a lot of validity to them, but it also brings in viewers who go into a movie not to see what the director has to offer, but how close a director can connect to them. I'm not Jewish. I wasn't going into the movie to see how Mexican of a movie James Gray can make it. That makes no sense
Right.
to me. I'm there to see his way of communicating with his family, his approach to school, and all that. And it's because of that that I found it interesting to see how they converse with each other, the family dynamics of, you had mentioned they had come over because of the Holocaust, but it was the grandparents. The parents themselves already had some time here. And the kid would be like the first one of them all who gets to decide what he wants to be, an artist, right? The mom's still trying to be in school. The dad is an electrician, a plumber. I want to say he's a plumber
Yeah.
because there's a really great
Some kind of like contractor.
Yeah, there's a really great speech that happens with Jeremy Strong's character about how he came in at an entry level job and nobody respected him except the grandpa. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, this is really interesting because I feel like I'm revisiting James Gray's family and the dynamics that they had within that home, right? Because not everybody may have that. It could be the dad who's the breadwinner, not the mom's grandpa who's still helping everybody's college out. I liked being within that vicinity. It's also in the same place where I do feel James Gray again is making a movie about looking back in time and seeing things at a different point of view. And I don't know how much of a different point of view he himself has now. I explained to you that there were some really weird moments where I was just like, I feel this is coming from your subconscious, but you forgot to explain it in the film.
Yeah.
At no point anywhere on the internet will you see the actual title for Armageddon Time that they use in the movie. But in the movie, they came out. It caught me so off guard because I'm looking at the poster right now and it's a beautiful title font in the poster.
Mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful title font that's different in the trailer. Even in the credits of the movie,
Mm-hmm.
but the opening and closing title font is the weirdest title font. Zach, I think you and I disagree with it. It comes out of nowhere. I'm sorry.
It's not that I disagree with you. He's choosing like a very graffiti style title font, which does evoke New York of the time, but it does not feel like it's evoking the New York of James Gray's youth. You know, like, yeah, he does ride the subway, which is full of that style of graffiti, but yeah, I mean,
Sure.
look, if I'm directing the same movie, probably not my choice for to go with like the whackness font for the
Yeah,
title here.
because then in that you also have a song or like a score that's a very Rastafari's type score, even though the big connection that they had was the Sugar Hill Gang, and that's a completely different type of hip hop. And again,
Mm-hmm.
the font, I could see it making sense if you had described it. I could see the score making sense because of all the Jamaican influences at that time. But they never really discussed it, and so it kind of felt like it was a thought in the back of his mind where he's like, "Oh, this was another thing that happened in my childhood. Put it in there." James, you forgot to describe it. So those would be the only things. And again, this is the font, bro. I swear to you, this is what the title of Armageddon Time looks like, Zach. This is what I mean by how off guard it caught me. So yeah, there's
Should
just some
we?
little things there where I'm wondering.
Yeah.
He's half into his home life, and I'm like, this is really interesting. And then the other half seems to
Mm,
feel his subconscious thoughts, maybe some riddled with guilt, some just kind of being fair connections here and there. But
yeah.
I don't think it's as inaccessible of a film. I think it's easy to connect to
Totally.
a child.
Totally. Like I do like both Lost City of Z and Ad Astra, his last two films, but they are both films that I found to be a little bit less penetrable at first. You know, they're both movies that I finished and thought, well, that was good, and then I found myself revisiting them in my thoughts over and over again, and then revisiting them in a rewatch because I found myself compelled to visit them again. This one is definitely more immediately rewarding. I think maybe just because it does fall under the like coming of age structure, and that is a really like palatable, digestible type of movie, and one that at least I tend to respond to. I like, you know, a young person growing into the world kind of story, but yeah, I just also, as I mentioned, there's definitely a bunch of things that I found personally uh, fascinating about the type of story he's trying to tell here that deepened my appreciation of it. But it's also that I think the personal element of it does make this something different than his other films. Like, even though he's got personal elements in his other films, Ad Astra's obviously like very much about being a father and like how you feel about your father. uh this one is so directly ripped from his memory, it feels at least like that it puts it into like a different class for me. But
For
maybe
sure.
we should get into some spoilers to talk about it in a little more specific. I think we're both positive on the film and recommending it, maybe me a bit more strongly than you. I would definitely venture out, go out, see it whenever you can, you know, check out a Friday night screening of it. Maybe not like the most fun time you'll have on a Friday night, but you'll have a lot to chew on and think about.
Yeah, to me, I'd say it's still worth going out. I'd give it the go out rating. More of a matinee for me. I think this is definitely one to
Right.
catch in the morning. I caught this one on a Saturday night. There's not a Saturday night movie with the boys. I'm gonna tell you that much right now. This is a morning movie. I think you want to come out of
Right.
this movie and there still be some sunlight outside. It's one
Hmm.
to have a discussion about. I don't know if it's going to last towards the Oscars run. It could. It's got a great cast,
Yeah.
crew, filmmakers behind it. I'm personally
If I
just
had to
rooting for Jeremy the
guess,
most.
if I had to guess, I think maybe it
Fonts.
gets a screenplay nomination, if best font nomination. Uh, just production design for that. I would consider it in production design otherwise, but
Yeah,
I
production
don't
design
know.
would be good. I actually really do like the trains. That's why when you had told me that you were trying to invoke the font from being the trains, I was like, it's the best. It's the best response, but I still don't want to buy it. But yeah, the production
Yeah.
design was pretty good. And again, I could see the script because if you look at this, if you go into this movie and you could be like, it doesn't seem like this guy gets it. If you're just looking at it from his perspective and not maliciously putting the intent on him that he's out there to like learn a lesson out of somebody else, if you listen to his interviews, you can hear that he is fully aware that he sees the mistakes of his past, of his family, and he is reckoning with that idea of having the privilege to be able to have been in a school and in a place that got him to make what movie is this for him?
Eighth.
I I can't fault a guy for being honest just because I want to be like what repeating back exactly what he just told me he's guilty of. So like I give it a matinee. I don't think it's one of the best of the year, but I always respect a director coming out and being able to give a personal message.
Definitely. All right, with that, we'll jump into some Armageddon Time spoilers. So, if you haven't seen the film yet or you don't want it spoiled for you, you can meet up with us on our next video. We're going to get into some Banshees of Inisherin talk a little bit later. But if you want to hear more about Armageddon Time, let's stick with us and we'll talk about some more details of this movie, starting with you were just talking about something that I was gonna touch on.
I got
Yeah,
one. Let
yeah,
me
go
abridge you
ahead.
this for you because I just thought of what it's like blaming James Gray for being something that in the interviews he then comes out and says, "Yeah, that's actually what I was approaching at."
Right.
I think we're in this new era of if anybody who you know is like a good person,
Mhm.
their uncle twice removed on the left side of their mother's did something, you're like, I can't believe you're related to that person. This is the era that we're in. This whole movie is, I apologize for being related to the people who I got benefits from. And you're like,
Right.
yeah, but did you realize that you're related to the people you got benefits from? I'm like, we're just having a, we're not really having a conversation here. We're kind of like blaming something for being what it is.
Yeah. That's actually sort of related to what I wanted to mention. It's interesting because there is sort of this underlined element of the film because he talks about wanting to be an artist and his family keeps dissuading him from doing that. And yet like we know James Gray is an artist. He's made 8 movies now. So like just that knowledge of who he's become shows us that he's kind of like gone away from his family, which, you know, they make a little bit literal in the actual ending of the film, as sort of walking away from the things that maybe
we'll get to that,
other
but
people
yeah,
will value.
It is there, yeah, for the movie, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, you know, the ideas of, you know, portraying his family as these people who think they're like find themselves comfortably liberal and are happy with their values, but will be like very casually racist over the dinner table. You know, they're probably patting themselves on the back for not voting for Reagan, but they're contributing to the policies that ultimately separated a whole class of people that are not like them.
Yeah, this man shaking his head when he's like, I can't believe a Reagan won. I think it's in the trailer too, right? It's like the big push.
Yeah.
I can't believe this Reagan won. And then I'm like, yo, your stock's probably
right.
Your 401k is probably getting very benefited right now. Like you're angry in public, but inside you're like,
yeah, his mom is head of the PTA, but won't even send her kids to school there.
Yeah, so it's some fascinating stuff because there's always that discussion, right? There's that phrase of you're socially liberal, fiscally conservative, right?
Right.
More people than you know are like that. And because of that, I thought it was fascinating to see his home life. And again, what he thought his perspective was. From my point of view, my boy's still rich, bro. My man is rich. I don't. Stop, bro. I'm going to evoke the clip from Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. You're upper middle class. We're not having this discussion.
Sure,
and you know that's all like that when that whole thing was happening.
The point is sort of that I was trying to make there is to establish that when they do ultimately end up in the private school, which is part of what we want to get into spoilers, they are met with a whole other class of people. Like his father is an electrician. He's not Fred Trump.
And no one's saying this, bro. But even if you're the ninth best player of a team, you still on the damn team. If you're going to school with the Trumps, you're in a different league than a lot of other people.
No, yeah, for sure, and that's part of the rising through the classes element of the film. But like they have to rise to that class. They're not there yet. They're there in the school to then get the jobs that will then put them there.
That is a rich discussion that is being had that other people don't have.
No,
so he's just having that discussion as if it's like a regular poverty type thing that everybody else goes through. It's like, nah, that is specifically an upper middle class discussion.
Yeah,
that's it.
For sure.
I think that's part of the disconnection that happens. He is allowed to vent about that because that is a discussion to be had. Rich people go through things where they're like, I know this sounds like a rich issue, but it's still something, you know, that needs to be discussed. I think he's just trying to pitch it as like, damn, this is something we went through like as a struggling family, and actual struggling audiences are going, honey, I don't think it's a little bit different when you have no one has the ability to leave a public school and enter a private school. Nobody has that. He does.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also a different equation in 1980 than it is right now, for sure. But like, you know, it is
tenfold
like,
the opposite.
Yeah, but it is, like because of the position that they were able, like being the children of grandparents who emigrated into the country and then being in a better position than they were, and then again the next generation is being elevated to another higher position in class. Like that is part of the story that this movie is telling. And yeah, I don't think like it's fair to say that because they're both going to public school in the beginning of the movie they're part of the same class. They're not. But he's also like, Paul's view of the world is a limited one because of his experience. Based on his peers, he's rich, and then he goes to another school where he's more on the lower class, as he finds out through his discussions with his classmates, where they will like call him a Jew and talk terribly about Johnny.
I see what you mean. I had brought up the model minority aspect of it earlier. It just kind of pushes why people don't. I feel like when it comes to a story like this, right, where you're too rich to be poor, but you're too poor to be rich, right?
Right.
You're Mexican, but not Mexican enough because you're too American. Chinese and not Chinese. You're black, but not too black, right? It's like because you're light skinned or whatever it is. No one will ever accept those stories because everybody wants it to be an absolute or the other. So already off the bat, the story that was pitched was already asked to be mutilated a ton because no one cares about those right in between things. Those are the biggest boo-hoos because the rich people don't want to hear it, and then the poor people think you're too rich to hear it. What I'm saying is that it's still valid. It is still a valid story to tell because the moment we start invalidating stories, ain't no one going to care about the opposite sides either. That said, though,
Totally.
What I found fascinating in the movie, we were discussing how he doesn't need to be told the lesson; he kind of already knows it. It's that he is also complicit in his own selfish reasons. One of the big
Hmm.
spoiler scenes,
Yeah.
he pitches the idea once he has switched schools and he's no longer really hanging out with his new buddy, but his new buddy keeps coming around the way, and he's
Johnny.
kind
Yeah.
of scared to talk about him because he knows that the new rich kids are going to make fun of him for speaking to him. But he ends
Yeah.
up pitching him this idea that like, yo, you and I can both run away together. We can become artists if we just jack this computer from inside the school.
Hmm.
But the only reason he wants to go inside the school was because his grandpa had reminded him never give up your art without signing it. And the only reason he went into that school was because he walks out of the classroom, but it's already, the painting he's trying to find has already been like locked up. He just wanted to sign it. And that whole sequence is what ends up getting his buddy in trouble because they were never going to sell that. How are you going to steal a computer and pawn it? Come on, bro. Come on, bro. Um, so
I
I
mean,
like that
that's
aspect of it
also like,
because there he's
I,
not holding his mistake on his parents. That is his
yeah,
mistake through and through.
absolutely. And it's something that he has to then like feel the consequences of. Although, I guess getting back into one
You
of the
think he did
reasons
it?
that the film has what?
You think he did it?
James Gray?
Is he
I don't
fictional or is he
know.
not? Because you
I don't
also
know. I
see how
wonder.
that's a whole other level of being like a Liam Neeson press talk, where you're venting and you're being honest, but then you cross the thing of like, nah, but you said you were gonna do something. Did you do it? Because this
Mhm.
is a movie about something that may have happened, and he didn't walk up and down the streets of Ireland looking to get something. This kid does go to jail.
Right, and that's again one of the things that I think has people feeling upset about the handling of the Johnny character, in that like he experiences the brunt of the consequences, and that he's sort of in a way forgotten by the movie, right? Like
Yeah.
the movie can move on, and Paul can have a more satisfying ending without really acknowledging Johnny again. And I don't know.
Until
Um,
2022, when you need a new movie idea.
Sure, perhaps. And I don't know. I am sympathetic to that argument. It's not like I don't think it's like an incorrect one to make. I just, again, we are getting back into the idea of like, how do you um depict this aspect of society, and try to like show that the consequences faced by a young black kid are not on the same level as the consequences faced by a young white one.
Oh, they meant to
And
show it. Yeah, I agree with you.
yeah,
We are
so
getting to
like
the point where we're scared to showcase things like that, and I don't think
mhm,
that's right. Disney remade Pinocchio, and instead of teaching kids to not drink alcohol, they switched it to root beer. And it's like,
right.
I see what you're sanitizing, but you're also sanitizing the idea of like, look what happens when you make mistakes. So if you're not
Mhm.
allowed to show the mistake, you're almost like giving them a pathway to do it because you're
So
not correcting them. Because we want to pretend that mistakes can't be made. They still have to be showcased.
totally, and maybe there are
It's
like
different
better
if he
ways
did
to.
it. It
Yeah,
feels like
there.
you're seeing like a recap of like, wait, you get to do a whole press run? I think
Yeah,
that
I
begs the
mean,
question.
I
If the
I
movie's supposed to feel real, then you want to know how's he doing? How's the other kid doing?
right, and then like maybe the question is to ask him how literal that scene is meant to be. I would
If
question
it's
whether or not
fictional,
he would
then
rip
why?
something.
It's like what's better, Zach? For it to be real and it be
Right,
like, wait, 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 or it to not be real and then still be like, wait, 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 wait.
totally. Um, the other thing that maybe feels fictional but apparently is real is the characters with some familiar last names in the film, including Fred
Yep.
Trump, Donald's father, as well as Marianne Trump, who are donors to the private school and appear in scenes of the movie. Jessica Chastain playing Marianne Trump in a memorable speech from the film. This is another detail lifted directly from Gray's life, because the Trumps were actually involved in the school he attended. He mentioned during the New York Film Festival press conference that he called his brother up to try and remember the details of
I heard that
Marianne
too.
Trump's speech,
Yeah.
so that they could put it into the movie. And it also serves to underline the political thesis of the film, because despite all of her advantages, Marianne also insists that she wasn't given any handouts, and she's where she is just by virtue of her own efforts, even though we know based on like her surroundings that that's not really the case.
Hmm. Do you think that that falls into what I'm saying about the Belfast thing? Looking back and remembering things with the point of view that we have right now in 2022?
Maybe perhaps. uh I
The loan thing in
I couldn't.
particular? It's a
Sorry.
trailer shot. The loan quote in particular is a trailer shot. I didn't know who they were in the trailers though.
Yeah.
So when I
Yeah, I
figured out
mean,
who she was, it hit different. I was like, oh, that's why she said you're not gonna make it out with any
you know
handout.
what I think is that like it's possible that like the attitude toward of like general generally being like put off by them, I can understand that, but maybe the like contextualizing it into the larger picture, that's really where
You
the
should be
adult
focusing
James
on.
Gray is coming in,
Yeah,
and kind of editorializing it perhaps. But
because I heard him speak about it, and
yeah.
he said that Donald did go to the exact same school he went to,
Hmm.
and he wanted to maybe do something with it, but he felt it would have been a little too on the nose. Like you're just
Right.
introducing Thanos, is going to take everything away from it. So he kind of just really wanted to focus on the parents, on the rest of the family. Um, so
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing.
I don't know.
It's the thing of like sometimes there's some people who are like so famous that it's almost like that transcends the film, and it's like
You
it's
already
like
had
almost
Reagan
hard
in
to
it. Yeah,
contain.
you've already had
Yeah,
Reagan in it. And we've been in a year where there's been so many Reagans. Like you'll watch a horror movie and Reagan will randomly just be on a radio. Like we're in this era where every director's trying to put him in there
yeah,
in some way, shape, or form. I thought
yeah.
the way he was able to contrast, the election on TV to the Trumps coming in and you being able to piece it together is what I mean by it being effective because he knows today's audiences will be able to connect the two pieces together and how they're related. But then it is also kind of like he is setting it up. He knows that we're going to connect the two. He knows that we're aware of a handout line
Right.
from the last couple of years, and he relays it there. He did mention that bit about calling up his brother and that they both remember the scene of him asking for the last name in the hallway to a T.
Hmm.
So it made me question more of his upbringing. I was like, how close were you to these people, bro? Because even in the end, he runs away, right? And thematically, for
Right.
the story, for the beginning, middle, and end that you get, it's him trying to break away from it.
Yeah, he's
He
literally
goes back
walking
to school,
away
my G.
from Fred Trump giving a speech, and you can read
To
that
come back and
very
finish
literally that he's walking
finish the
away
year.
from that kind of thinking.
But he still graduates from the school.
I mean, I don't know how much agency a preteen has over where they go to school.
They shouldn't. They should have any. But yeah, I guess. So what's the lesson, or what's the change that is made after you watch Armageddon Time?
Are you asking me personally?
I don't know, bro.
Like,
You
how is
need
my life
you need to
different
have
since James Gray's
you
eighth
need to
movie?
have the answers. What private schools have you dropped out of immediately after Armageddon Time?
I mean, I don't know. I think it's a film that did sort of like make me have certain conversations that I don't know. I found to be fascinating and are maybe provocative in some ways, but I think it's trying to open up a conversation about solidarity and maybe like I don't know how much a movie's going to get that done, but like it's the part of the role that art has to play is to like stimulate your mind and perhaps like inspire some ideas in you. And I don't know, it did that for me. So I'm not really going to complain about it. I can see other people not being affected the same way, but I was affected.
I got one idea. Tomorrow, 7 o'clock. I know a school that's got MacBook computers. You and I are gonna go in there. We go take Intercut on the road, baby.
Yeah, let's do it.
This is
Yeah,
it.
this is how we're gonna fund our Sundance trip.
The next one's gonna be crispy images on both of our screens. Just watch
Yeah.
that. The process is gonna be better.
No, I know what James Gray got me to do. He got me to vote. I voted today. I know it's a day late, but I did vote today. So hopefully they count it. I'm not so sure.
They might.
Any more Armageddon Time thoughts, or should we wrap this after credits up? This is a fun talk.
No, yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say for it. Not one of his best movies in my opinion. I think if I'm recommending
Mhm.
James Gray to people, I really like Ad Astra. I thought it was a very good sci-fi movie, space movie, especially at that period when we were bombarded with a lot of them. I think it looks beautiful. I think it's on HBO Max. Check that one out if you can. But this one, I'd say in terms of a fall movie, especially when that played at festivals, it's still worth the matinee price. If you've heard our discussion, you've heard other discussions, and you're kind of on the fence on it, it's still worth watching at home. Still have it on your radar because I think some of the performances are worth getting. And
Absolutely.
even if you disagree, I think it's important to still understand differing perspectives from both ends. From this
Mhm.
filmmaker who's telling you his story, and from the audience members who are telling the filmmaker, hey, this is also our story. Because in listening to those different interpretations and in communicating, you are able to understand and get and accomplish what the movie is supposed to be setting out to accomplish.
Yeah, absolutely. So
That font still
that's
sucks, though.
movie's good though. I think that's well put. I'll give it my recommendation as well. You can catch more from us here on Intercut, but that's all for this edition of After Credits. I'm Zach Shevich. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, or Letterboxd at ZShevich. That's ZShevich. And check out my YouTube or TikTok channels at Multiplex Art. Where can people find more from you?
You could find me over at Let Me Explain on YouTube, Letterbox, Twitter. I think, right? We still on Twitter?
Yeah,
Something
we're still
happened
on
on
Twitter.
Twitter today. Like every day has been something new on Twitter, so I don't know what
Yeah.
happened today on Twitter, but I think I'm still on Twitter.
No, we don't got the check marks, so we're in the clear.
Oh, is everybody paying for it? Because now I'm going through people with check marks and I'd be like, oh, you got a check mark. And I'm going like, boy, you wasting $8 on this? You can catch us every week here on the Intercut podcast.
You can catch us every week on Intercut on iTunes, Anchor, Spotify, whatever your favorite podcatcher is. I like Overcast. And then make sure you subscribe not just to the audio podcast, but to the video feed as well on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/IntercutPod, where you can catch our bright smiling faces as we break down the latest in entertainment. Find new episodes of the Intercut Weekend Must Watch streaming on our YouTube channel every Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern. Please leave a comment, like the videos, and consider heading over to iTunes to give us that much requested 5-star review. Like our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages. Support our Patreon. All of them are at Intercut Pod to get updates throughout the week from me, from Art, from all the guests we feature here on Intercut. And hit the link to join our Discord community in the description attached to this episode. Thanks again for tuning in. And until next time, be a mensch.